The lights were blinding. The crowd was roaring. More than 20,000 people were on their feet, watching Michael Jackson do what only he could do. It was supposed to be just another unforgettable moment in an already legendary show. Michael sang. He danced. He pushed his body past its limits, like he always did. But then something went wrong. In the middle of the performance, Michael slowed down. His steps lost precision. His face changed. And suddenly he collapsed on stage. At first, the audience thought it was part of the act. Michael was known for dramatic pauses, powerful illusions, perfect timing. But this time, the music stopped. The band froze. The dancers didn't move. Security rushed forward. And the arena, once deafening, fell into a terrifying silence. No screams. No cheers. Just thousands of people holding their breath, wondering if the King of Pop was okay, or if they were witnessing something tragic in real time. Seconds passed. Then more seconds. And that's when something unexpected happened. From somewhere in the crowd, one single fan did something so emotional, so pure, that it broke the silence and reached Michael in a way no doctor, no guard, no staff member could. What did that fan do? How did Michael respond? And why do people who were there still say this was one of the most powerful moments of his entire career? Stay with his story until the end, because what happened next proves that Michael Jackson's greatest strength was never just his talent. It was the bond he shared with his fans. The concert had been building toward that moment for nearly 2 hours. From the first note to the last scream of the crowd, Michael Jackson had been giving everything he had, his voice, his body, his energy, his soul. This wasn't unusual. Michael never performed at half capacity. Every show was treated as if it might be the last time the audience would ever see him on stage. And on this night, the pressure was even heavier. The arena was packed to its limits. Tens of thousands of fans stood shoulder to shoulder, many of them having waited their entire lives to see Michael Jackson live. Some had flown across continents. Some had slept outside ticket offices for days. Some were seeing him for first, and what would unknowingly be the only time. The lights exploded across the stage in waves of white and gold. The bass vibrated through the floor. Sweat glistened on Michael's face as he moved with razor-sharp precision. Every step timed perfectly, every gesture controlled. He looked thin, exhausted, but still unmistakably Michael Jackson. Behind the scenes, only a few people knew how fragile he really was. Michael had barely slept the night before. Insomnia had been tormenting him for years, and the physical pain from rehearsals and past injuries never truly left his body. Painkillers, adrenaline, and sheer willpower were what carried him through most performances. Canceling a show was never an option in his mind. Letting fans down felt worse to him than physical suffering. As the song transitioned into one of the most demanding parts of the set, Michael pushed harder. His breathing became shallow. His chest tightened. The lights felt hotter than usual. The stage seemed farther away from his feet, almost unreal. Still, he kept going. From the audience, no one noticed the warning signs. To them, Michael looked intense, focused, emotional in character. Some even thought the strain on his face made the performance more powerful. Then it happened. Mid-step, Michael faltered. It was subtle at first, just a fraction of a second where his timing slipped. His foot landed wrong. His shoulders dipped forward slightly. The dancers around him instinctively adjusted, assuming it was part of the choreography. Michael tried to correct himself, but his body didn't respond. His knees buckled, and in a moment that felt unreal, Michael Jackson collapsed onto the stage. At first, there was confusion. The music kept playing for a heartbeat longer. Some fans clapped, thinking it was a dramatic pause. Others leaned forward, squinting, trying to understand what they were seeing. Michael had done unexpected things on stage before. He had dropped to the floor. He had frozen in place for long seconds. He had turned silence into spectacle. But this was different. The band stopped. The dancers froze, their faces losing all performance expression as reality hit them. One of them took a step toward Michael, then stopped, unsure whether they were allowed to break formation. Security began moving, and the arena went silent. Not the excited, anticipatory silence of a crowd waiting for a big moment, but a heavy, Suffocating silence filled with fear. Tens of thousands of people stood completely still. You could hear individual gasps. Someone dropped something in the stands, and the sound echoed. Michael lay motionless on the stage. From where he was, the lights were blinding. His ears rang. His heart pounded violently, then felt like it skipped beats. He tried to move his hands, to push himself up, but his body felt disconnected, like it no longer belonged to him. In his mind, one thought kept repeating, "Not here. Please, not here." Medical staff rushed toward him. A stage manager shouted instructions. Someone called for water. Another voice said his name over and over again, trying to get his attention. "Michael, Michael, can you hear me?" But the crowd didn't hear any of that. What they saw was their hero lying still. Some fans covered their mouths. Others started crying silently. Many clasped their hands together, praying. Phones had been raised to record the show, slowly lowered, forgotten. Seconds felt like minutes. Parents held their children tighter. Longtime fans felt their stomachs drop with a terrifying realization. Michael Jackson was not invincible. Not tonight. Not ever. From the stage floor, Michael could faintly sense the silence. It scared him more than the pain. A silent audience meant fear, and the idea that it frightened them, hurt them emotionally, cut deeper than anything physical. He wanted to reassure them. He wanted to stand up, but his body still wouldn't cooperate. And then, through the silence, something unexpected happened. From somewhere high in the stands, a single voice broke through. Not a scream, not hysterics. A voice, trembling but clear, called out his name. Michael, just one voice. Then it said something else. Something simple. Something human. Something that wasn't planned. And in that moment, everything began to change. The voice didn't shout. It didn't beg. It didn't scream Michael Jackson's name the way thousands of fans had screamed it for decades. It was softer than that. Almost fragile. "Michael, it's okay. Take your time." The words floated through the arena like something unreal, cutting through the silence with a gentleness that stopped everyone in their tracks. Security froze. The dancers turned their heads toward the sound. Medical staff paused for a split second, startled, not because the voice was loud, but because it was calm, steady, human. It came from the upper stands, far from the stage. A single fan, standing alone, hands shaking, had spoken without realizing that the entire arena would hear her. For a moment, no one reacted. Then something extraordinary happened. The silence didn't return. Instead, it softened. People stopped holding their breath. A murmur spread, not panic, not chaos, but emotion. Tears. Relief mixed with fear. As if that one voice had given everyone permission to feel again. On the stage, Michael heard it. At first, he wasn't sure it was real. The ringing in his ears distorted everything. But the words stayed with him. "It's okay. Take your time. No demands. No expectations. No pressure to perform. Just permission to exist." His chest tightened, not from pain this time, but from emotion. For most of his life, Michael had been pushed forward. As a child, as a performer, as a symbol. Even when he was exhausted, broken, barely standing, the world expected him to keep moving. But this voice wasn't asking for anything. It wasn't saying get up. It wasn't saying dance. It was saying, you matter more than the show. Michael's fingers twitched. A medic noticed immediately. "He's responding," someone whispered urgently. Michael blinked against the harsh lights. His vision swam, but the fog began to lift just enough for him to focus on the faces above him. Concerned, serious, afraid. "I'm here," he tried to say. Only a breath came out, but it was enough. "Michael," the medic said gently, "squeeze my hand if you can hear me." Michael gathered what little strength he had left and squeezed. The response was instant. Instructions were barked. Water appeared. A jacket was placed under his head to shield him from the heat of the stage. But something else was happening in the arena. People began to clap. Not wildly, not rhythmically. Slow, soft, careful, as if they were afraid that loud noise might hurt him. The applause wasn't for a performance. It was encouragement. And then, almost without coordination, Voices joined in. You're not alone. We love you, Michael. Take your time. The words rolled toward the stage like a wave, not demanding, not impatient, but supportive. Thousands of people who had come to see a legend now stood united in concern for a human being. Michael felt tears slip from the corners of his eyes. This was something he had rarely experienced. Love without expectation. Fame had taught him that applause usually came with conditions. Sing this. Dance like that. Be perfect. Be strong. Be magical. But here, lying on a cold stage floor, stripped of performance and control, he was receiving something purer. Compassion. He slowly lifted his hand. The arena gasped. Michael raised 2 fingers, not in a victory sign, but simply to show he was conscious, alive, present. The applause swelled, then immediately softened again, as if the crowd instinctively knew not to overwhelm him. Security scanned the stands, trying to locate the fan who had spoken first. They never found her. She had already sat down, hands covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face, shocked that her voice had carried so far. She hadn't planned to speak. She hadn't thought. She had just reacted to seeing someone she loved in pain. Backstage staff prepared a stretcher, but Michael shook his head weakly. Sit up, he whispered. They helped him slowly, carefully, support his back as he rose to a seated position. The world tilted, but it didn't disappear this time. From that position, Michael could finally see the crowd, faces upon faces. Worry, love, fear, loyalty. Not fans waiting to be entertained. People waiting to see if he was okay. And something inside him shifted. For the first time in years, maybe decades, Michael felt allowed to stop, allowed to not be perfect, allowed to be fragile in front of the world. He brought the microphone close to his mouth, hands still trembling. The arena went silent again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was attention. I'm sorry, he said softly. The words barely left his lips before thousands of voices answered at once. No, don't be sorry. We're here for you. Michael swallowed hard. I didn't want to scare you. A lump formed in his throat. I just needed a moment. The crowd erupted not in screams, but in reassurance. Take all the time you need. We love you. Your health comes first. Michael closed his eyes. That was the moment, not the collapse, not the silence, but this. The realization that he didn't have to bleed himself dry to be loved. That his worth wasn't tied to how long he could stay standing. That somewhere along the way, the world had learned to care about Michael, not just Michael Jackson. As medics prepared to escort him off stage, Michael glanced once more toward the upper stands, the place where that first voice had come from. He didn't know who she was. He never would, but he knew what she had given him. Permission, and as he was helped to his feet and guided toward the wings, the crowd remained standing, not chanting, not demanding more, but honoring the quiet truth that had revealed itself that night. Even legends are human, and sometimes the smallest voice can change everything. Behind the curtain, the noise of the arena faded into a distant echo. The moment Michael Jackson stepped off the stage, the weight of everything that had just happened finally settled on him. His legs trembled, not from adrenaline anymore, but from exhaustion that went deeper than muscle or bone. Backstage lights were harsh and unflattering, nothing like the warm glow of the stage. Crew members stood frozen for a moment, unsure whether to move, speak, or simply stay out of the way. No one wanted to make the wrong move. No one wanted to be the person who pushed him too fast. Slowly, a medic said, one arm firmly around Michael's back. Just focus on breathing. Michael nodded weakly. His chest rose and fell unevenly. Sweat clung to his skin, and his shirt was soaked through. Someone draped a towel over his shoulders. Another offered water, holding the bottle carefully so it didn't shake. He took a small sip. Then another. His hands were still trembling. In a nearby hallway, the tour manager was already on the phone, voice low and urgent. Clear the dressing room. No press. No guests. Nobody goes in unless approved. For once, no one argued. Everyone had seen what happened. Everyone understood that this wasn't about schedules or contracts or expectations. This was about whether Michael Jackson was okay. Inside the dressing room, Michael was guided into a chair. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head lowered, trying to steady himself. His breathing slowly returned to normal, but his mind was racing. The collapse replayed in his head in fragments. The sudden weakness, the silence, the voice, that voice. It echoed louder in his memory now than the roar of the crowd ever had. It's okay. Take your time. Michael pressed his fingers against his eyes. Emotion surged unexpectedly, sharp and overwhelming. Tears slipped down his cheeks before he had stopped them. A longtime crew member noticed and quietly turned away, giving him privacy. No cameras, no phones, no spectacle, just a man coming back to himself. I didn't want it to happen like that, Michael said softly, almost to himself. You didn't do anything wrong, someone replied gently. You push yourself hard. Too hard. Michael let out a shaky breath. I always do. The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. A doctor knelt in front of him, checking his pulse, his pupils, his blood pressure. You were dehydrated and overexerted, he said calmly. Your body shut you down to protect itself. Michael gave a faint, tired smile. My body's smarter than me. The doctor met his eyes. Your body has been trying to tell you to slow down for a long time. Michael didn't respond right away, because slowing down had never been an option. Not when he was 5. Not when the world expected perfection. Not when thousands of people paid to see him give everything he had. But tonight, something had been different. Out in the arena, the audience was still there. They hadn't rushed the exits. They hadn't demanded refunds or explanations. Instead, many sat quietly, some holding hands, some wiping tears, waiting for news. And when an announcement finally came over speakers, Michael is stable and receiving medical care. The relief was immediate. Applause filled the space. Not because the show would continue, but because he was alive. Backstage, Michael listened as a distant sound reached him. His shoulders slumped as the tension he'd been holding finally released. They're clapping, he whispered. Yes, someone said. For you? Not for a song. Not for a move. For him. Michael leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. His mind drifted back to childhood rehearsals, to being told to keep going no matter how tired he was, to learning early that stopping meant disappointing people. But tonight, when he stopped, they stayed. That realization shook him more than the collapse itself. Hours later, long after the stage lights were off and the arena had emptied, Michael sat alone in his dressing room. Most of the staff had gone. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a deep, bone-heavy fatigue. A mirror hung across from him. He barely recognized the reflection, not because of how he looked, but because of how he felt. Exposed, vulnerable, and strangely lighter. Someone knocked softly on the door. Michael, there's a note. A folded piece of paper was handed to him. No name, no seat number, just a short message written in shaky handwriting. You don't owe us anything. Thank you for being human. Michael stared at the words for a long time. His throat tightened. The fan. He didn't know how it was possible, but somehow the person who had spoken out in the silence had found a way to reach him again. He folded the note carefully and placed it in his pocket, close to his heart. Later that night, as he was escorted out through a quiet exit, Michael paused. He looked back once, toward the empty stage, the darkened arena, the place where he had fallen, and instead of fear, he felt gratitude. That night would be remembered, not as the night Michael Jackson collapsed, but as the night the world stopped demanding and started listening. And somewhere deep inside, Michael made a quiet promise to himself. Next time his body asked him to stop, he would listen. The morning after collapse, the world woke up to headlines. They were everywhere, on televisions and hotel lobbies, on radios and cars, on front pages stacked outside convenience stores. Michael Jackson collapses on stage. Pop icon faints mid-performance. Concert halted after medical emergency. But what surprised everyone was what wasn't there. No scandal, no ridicule, no mocking commentary. Instead, something unfamiliar filled the coverage. concern. Video clips of the moment played again and again, not of Michael falling, but of what came after. The silence, the stillness, the single voice breaking through the darkness. Commentators replayed the footage slowly, almost reverently. "You can hear it," one journalist said. "There's no screaming, no chaos, just respect." Social media flooded with posts from fans who had been there that night. "I've never felt an arena go quiet like that. It didn't feel like a concert anymore. It felt like a prayer." That fan gave him permission to be human. Michael watched none of it. His phone was taken away at the doctor's insistence. His TV stayed off. He spent the morning in a quiet recovery suite, sunlight filtering softly through sheer curtains. For once, there was no schedule taped to the wall, no rehearsals, no fittings, no meetings, just rest. Michael lay back against the pillows, listening to the sound of his own breathing. Each inhale felt deliberate now, something to be noticed instead of ignored. A nurse checked his vitals and smiled gently. "You're doing better today." Michael nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated before leaving. "My sister was at the concert last night," she said. "She said it was different. She said she'd never felt closer to you." Michael's eyes softened. "I'm glad," he said quietly. When the door closed, the room returned to silence. But this silence wasn't heavy. It wasn't frightening. It felt safe. Later that afternoon, his longtime manager sat across from him, papers neatly stacked, expression cautious. "The tour is on hold," he said. "Doctors won't clear you for at least a few weeks, maybe longer." Michael expected panic to rise in his chest. It didn't. Instead, there was relief. "Okay," he said. The manager blinked. "That's all." Michael looked down at his hands. "I think my body made the decision for me." There was a pause. Then the manager sighed. "The fans are worried, but they're supportive. Shockingly supportive." Michael smiled faintly. "They always are, when I let them be." That night, alone again, Michael finally allowed himself to think about the fan. Not who they were, but what they represented. That voice hadn't demanded anything, hadn't begged him to stand up, hadn't reminded him of expectations. It had offered permission. And no one, no producer, no parent, no audience, had ever done that before. In the days that followed, letters arrived by the hundreds, some handwritten, some typed, some barely legible through tears. Fans wrote about their own moments of collapse, emotional, physical, spiritual. When you fell, it felt like you were showing us it's okay to fall too. I stopped pushing myself after that night. You didn't fail us. You saved us. Michael read every letter slowly. Each one chipped away at a belief he'd carried his entire life, that his worth came from endurance, that stopping meant disappointing, that silence meant failure. One afternoon, while sitting by the window, Michael asked for a pen and paper. He hadn't planned what he was going to write. The words came on their own, to the one who spoke when the world went quiet. "You reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago, that I am not just what I give. Thank you for seeing me." He never signed it. He didn't need to. Weeks passed. Physically, Michael recovered. Slowly, carefully, under supervision. But something deeper had shifted. He moved differently now, less rushed, less rigid. He laughed more easily. He slept longer. When rehearsals eventually resumed in a limited capacity, he stopped when he felt tired. And something remarkable happened. No one complained. The crew adjusted. The dancers adapted. The music waited. The fear he'd lived with that the world would abandon him the moment he showed weakness never materialized. Instead, the world leaned closer. At a private rehearsal weeks later, Michael stood alone on the stage. Lights dimmed low. No audience. No pressure. Just him in the space. He closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he was about to perform. He felt like he was about to exist. When he opened his eyes, he whispered softly to the empty seats, "Thank you for letting me stop." And in that quiet, he understood something profound. That night on the stage, the collapse, the silence, the fan's voice, it wasn't a breakdown. It was a moment of truth, a reminder that even legends are allowed to breathe. that strength isn't proven by how long you stand, but by knowing when it's okay to sit down. And somewhere in an arena that once held thousands, the echo of a single voice still lingered. Not loud, not demanding, just human. And for Michael Jackson, that made all the difference. Months later, when people spoke about that night, they rarely described it as the moment Michael Jackson collapsed on stage. They called it the night the mask slipped, not the physical mask of fame, but the invisible one Michael had worn since childhood, the one that told him he had to endure no matter the cost, the one that said stopping was weakness, the one that whispered that love was conditional. That night changed everything. Not immediately, not dramatically, but permanently. Michael returned home after his recovery period quieter than before, more reflective. The house felt different to him now, less like a fortress, more like a refuge. His children noticed first. Prince watched his father sit longer at the breakfast table. Instead of rushing away, Paris noticed how Michael listened more, really listened, when they spoke. BG noticed the way his father hugged him tighter, but without that faint tension in his arms, as if he were afraid to let go. One evening, Paris broke the silence. "Daddy," she said softly, "were you scared when you fell?" Michael looked at her, surprised by the directness of the question. He thought for a moment, then he nodded. "Yes," he said honestly, "I was very scared." Prince frowned. "I thought you were never scared." Michael smiled sadly. "I've been scared most of my life." The children exchanged glances, trying to reconcile this with a man the world called invincible. But, Michael continued, something happened after, something beautiful. "What?" BG asked. Michael knelt, so he was at their level. "I realized I don't have to be strong all the time to be loved." That was the lesson he wanted them to carry. One he had learned too late, but hoped they wouldn't. As plans for future performances were discussed, Michael made decisions that shocked everyone around him. He reduced dates. He shortened rehearsals. He insisted on medical oversight, not as an obligation, but as a boundary. When people pushed back, he didn't apologize. "I'm listening to my body now," he said calmly. "I ignored it for 50 years. I won't do that anymore." The industry didn't collapse because of it. The fans didn't disappear. In fact, something unexpected happened. They stayed. When Michael finally returned to the stage, months later, cautiously, intentionally, it wasn't announced with fireworks or spectacle. There was no dramatic speech, just music. And before the first song began, Michael stepped forward, hand over his heart. "I want to thank you," he said, voice steady but emotional, "for your patience, for your kindness, for reminding me that silence doesn't mean abandonment." The crowd didn't scream. They listened, and somewhere in the sea of faces, Michael felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Safety. He never tried to identify the fan who had spoken that night, not because he didn't want to, but because he understood something important. That voice didn't belong to one person. It belonged to everyone who had ever needed permission to stop. To every person who had ever pushed through pain because they believed their worth depended on endurance. Michael carried that moment with him quietly. He spoke about it rarely, but when he did, it was never framed as tragedy. "It was a gift," he once told a close friend. "The greatest gift. Someone saw me not as a symbol, but as a man." In the years that followed, that night became legend, not because a superstar fell, but because the world didn't demand he get back up. Fans would say, "That was the night Michael taught us compassion." Others said, "That was the night he showed us what real strength looks like." But for Michael, the truth was simpler. It was a night he finally believed he didn't have to earn love through suffering. Long after the lights dimmed and the stage was cleared, that silence lived on, not as emptiness, but as understanding, a shared breath between artist and audience, a pause that healed more than applause ever could. And somewhere in that pause, Michael Jackson stopped being a legend for a moment and became exactly what he had always wanted to be: human. The weeks after the incident were filled with questions Michael couldn't easily answer. Not from the press, those he had learned to tune out long ago, but from himself. At night, when the house was quiet and the children were asleep, Michael would sit alone, lights dimmed, replaying the moment in his mind. The fall, the shock, the silence, and then that voice, clear, steady, human, cut into the panic like a hand reaching out in the dark. "It's okay, Michael. Take your time." He had spent a lifetime believing that silence meant rejection, that when the noise stopped, love disappeared. But that night rewrote something deep inside him. The silence hadn't been empty. It had been full of care. That realization unsettled him more than collapse itself. Because if that was true, if he didn't have to perform to be worthy, then everything he had built his identity on began to shift. Michael started therapy again, this time not to fix himself, but to understand himself. In one session, his therapist asked him a simple question. What did that fan give you in that moment? Michael didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, permission. Permission for what? To stop being everything. The therapist nodded. And who are you when you stop? Michael swallowed. I'm still figuring that out. For the first time in his life, he allowed himself not to know. Meanwhile, the story spread, but not in the way scandals usually did. Fans didn't share videos of him falling. They shared videos of the silence. Clips of thousands of people standing still, hands over mouths, eyes full of concern. Comment sections weren't filled with jokes or criticism, but with words like protect him, he's human. Let him rest. Michael read some of them late at night, quietly, when no one was watching. And for once, the words didn't feel like pressure. They felt like arms around him. One letter, sent by a fan and handwritten in careful ink, stayed with him the most. Dear Michael, you taught us how to dance. But that night, you taught us how to care. Thank you for trusting us with your silence. He folded the letter and kept it in a drawer beside his bed, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. As rehearsals resumed, Michael changed how he worked. Not drastically, not dramatically, but deliberately. He stopped when he felt dizzy. He sat when his legs trembled. He spoke up when something didn't feel right. At first, people didn't know how to react. Some thought it was temporary. Others thought it was fear. But Michael knew better. It was honesty. One afternoon, during a rehearsal break, a young backup dancer hesitated before approaching him. "Mr. Jackson," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," Michael replied. "When you stopped on stage that night, weren't you afraid people would think you were weak?" Michael smiled gently. "I was afraid my whole life of being weak." She nodded. "But you weren't." "No," he said. "I was finally strong in a different way." The dancer walked away with tears in her eyes, and Michael realized something quietly profound. His vulnerability had given others permission, too. The fan who had spoken up that night never revealed themselves publicly. No interviews, no spotlight. And Michael was grateful, because the moment didn't belong to one person. It belonged to everyone who had ever wanted to say, "Please don't hurt yourself for us." In interviews months later, when journalists cautiously brought up the incident, Michael didn't dramatize it. "I fainted," he said simply, "and people cared." "But didn't it change you?" one reporter asked. Michael paused. "Yes," he said. "It reminded me I don't have to disappear for people to love me." That sentence never made headlines, but it should have. As time passed, Michael became more present. Not louder, not flashier, just present. He laughed more easily with his children. He listened without distraction. He cried when he needed to and didn't apologize for it. One night, Prince asked him, "Dad, are you going to be okay?" Michael pulled his son close. "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but I know I don't have to pretend anymore." And that was enough. Years later, long after the stage lights dimmed and the music echoed into history, fans would still talk about that night, not as a tragedy, but as a turning point. The night a legend collapsed, and a man was held instead of judged. The night's silence spoke louder than applause. The night Michael Jackson learned that being human wasn't failure. It was the one thing he'd been searching for all along. And somewhere, in that stillness between heartbeat and breath, the world learned it too.